Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good 2 o'clock in the morning if that's when you happen to be watching this. We're doing this in the evening, but you can watch it at your pleasure. This is the McHenry County Response Editorial Staff response to the progressive narrative. With me today are
Ken Nicholson
and Eric Syverson.
And I'm Rich Rostron. And today we are discussing the Safety Act. This should be an extremely well done program because we did this for 42 minutes last week, at which time we realized that we had failed to press the record button. So this is this is our second time through, and according to what we see up there right now,
and we have bars moving, so we do have audio. So
we have the indications that this is recording this week, which should be a wonderful thing. So we're going to talk about the Safety Act. What's the Safety Act?
Well, the Safety Act is a criminal justice reform bill that was passed almost 2 years ago now, with only one party's support, and passed in the middle of the night. And it's reforming the criminal justice system here in Illinois to try and make the criminal justice system more fair.
As I understand it, to make it clear, this is an 800-page, approximately 800-page document that was published hours before it was voted on, and that vote took place at 4 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
So most of the people, certainly, and quite possibly all the people that voted on this bill had no idea what was in it.
And you think that's necessary that they do?
Well, yeah, I think it's sort of a good idea if we don't pass legislation unless the folks responsible for it know what's in it.
Well, maybe it would be like a pleasant surprise,
Yeah, in a heartbeat, sure.
Well, if they trust the people that are writing it,
Well,
why do they have to, go through it with a fine-tooth comb if they can just trust the people who are writing the bills?
That would be about 100% the definition of the problem.
Well, the really good news about this is nobody has any objections to it. Everybody's embraced it, and they're all on board. They all want this thing to go through, and actually, what happens with this thing January 1st?
Goes into effect.
Some
of it already is in effect.
Yeah.
The next portion of it goes into effect.
The nasty parts go into effect.
And that includes cashless bail and things we'll talk about here.
Right. And you say everybody's in favor of it. That's interesting.
That was a touch of sarcasm. Actually,
is that what that was?
Actually, there are 102 state's attorneys in Illinois, 102 counties, and 100 of these 102 state's attorneys have signed on to a lawsuit.
2 lawsuits, actually.
Actually, 2. You're correct. 2 lawsuits going after this law as unconstitutional.
Yeah, the effort of those 2 suits, the thrust is to simply erase this, get rid of it, because it's going to be really hard to fix as opposed to just.
Well, this attack on this is totally partisan because all 100 of these state's attorneys are Republicans.
Not quite true.
No,
I believe 46 of them are Democrats.
So actually, it's a bipartisan challenge to the
resistance. Law. Yes,
resistance. I like that word.
And so there's 102 state's attorneys. There's 2 that have not signed on to lawsuits, but one of those 2 has spoken out about that things need to change in the Safety Act.
So which is the one that hasn't spoken? Well, which are the 2 that, can we have like a guessing game here? People go,
let's just name them. Mr. Reinhardt of Lake County is one, and Kim Fox is the other.
And it's really no surprise that Kim Fox is the other because she's been doing this already in Cook County. And it's worked wonderfully there.
Right. I wouldn't want to be living in Chicago right now. And there are a whole lot of people that feel that way.
Yeah, it's a public shooting gallery down there.
Yep.
Had some exceptional, even by their standards, exceptional shooting this past weekend on the west side, I believe is what I heard.
I've been blessed to be away from the news for a day and a half. What happened?
How many people? 14 people shot, including 3
I
children?
don't know. I did not hear. But I do have some of their statistics on crime, the citywide this year compared to last year. This is as of October 23rd. So year to date, the murders, there's only been 564.
Only.
Which is down from last year because there was 676 to that point last year. So, murder rate is down by 17%. But when you look at then, theft and motor vehicle theft, theft is up 60%, up to 16,130. And motor vehicle theft is up by 83%, up to 14,899.
That's this last year, or no, our current year compared to 2021.
Compared to 2021 up till that week of October.
Right.
At which point Kim Fox had already been in office for a year.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So and things got worse then.
Continued to get worse. Yes.
Yeah. So,
Well, I would still wonder. I mean, that's the murder rate, and that's based on the people that have died. What about the shootings? Because you'll have 60 shootings on a weekend, and 5 people die.
It's down 12% from last year,
The shootings are down,
or 20% from last year, 12% from 2 years ago, but it's up 20% from 4 years ago.
Okay.
There's 2,376 shooting incidents to date this year in the city of Chicago.
The city still earns the name Chirac.
Yeah.
I believe.
Overall, crime is up by 39%, or violent crimes are up by 39% in the city of Chicago this year.
So, as I understand it, with these lawsuits, is that there were the 2 lawsuits. The one is that the law should not address more than one topic, and this law addresses a multitude in 800 pages. You said.
Sort of an oversimplification, but that is the essence of it. And this law addresses all kinds of things.
This was a state. This is violating a state law that restricts them in order to avoid pork, where they just throw things into a bill to get them passed.
And what we have here is
Judicial pork.
yes, not bad. Yeah.
The other one is that it steps on judicial authority. I had somebody challenging me that on Facebook this week, and I pointed out, well, you and I may disagree about this, but 100 state's attorneys in Illinois apparently disagree with you. Not you, but the person I was talking to. So the legislature is stepping in and basically taking control of how the judiciary responds to people who have been charged with crimes.
It does that in a couple of ways. The first way would be pretrial release. So you start with what's typically called a bond hearing, or it's a detention hearing. So you commit a crime, you're arrested, and then you go to a hearing where they decide whether you're going to be released while you're awaiting trial or you're going to be held on bond. So this bill eliminates the ability for them to hold you on bond.
For the great majority of crimes.
Yes. And so what it does is creates a burden for the prosecutor to have to prove that you are a risk to a particular person or group of people in order for you to be held while you're awaiting trial. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so it creates a new timeline for that. So the detention hearing has to be within 24 hours now of when you are booked for your crime. Where could that present a problem?
Well, the one way that it says you have to be the state's attorney or the state's attorney general, state's attorney's office has to prove that you're a threat to an individual. Let's suppose that some guy kills his wife, murders his wife. He's held on charges. He hasn't been convicted yet, but he's held on charges for this. Well, the person he would probably be identified as a threat to is his wife. She's already dead. So that would not be, they could not hold him based on being a threat to somebody because he's already killed the person he's presumed to be a threat to.
And now what if he has said that he's going to flee and leave the area?
I don't think we brought that up before, but I don't see anything that I've seen about this that would suggest that's a problem.
So it addresses it. It's actually on pages 334 and 335 of the 764
You were
pages.
trapping me, weren't you?
It talks about willful flight, and so that means that you're planning or attempting to intentionally evade prosecution by concealing oneself. And so they cannot hold you just because they believe that you are going to be a flight risk. They can't hold you just because you have evaded prosecution in the past, because you are not necessarily a threat to a particular person or a group of people.
So the only reason they can detain somebody is if they are a threat to a specific individual or more than one individual.
Or you are at that point already making attempts to flee, because then that is committing other crimes. If you have not yet made any attempt to flee.
That sort of takes away the menace to society position completely for the state's attorney, right? The fact that he believes that you're likely to go out on the street and do dirt to some undefined person is not sufficient.
Well, there's no reason to think that these people would do anything wrong. I mean, you've got...
And if you have somebody with no ties to the community, and there's reason to believe that they would just leave if they were released and not continue with the prosecution, they can be released under their own recognizance and let out and flee the state.
We've actually had fairly good examples of what's happening with this. New York City is an excellent example. The rail system, the subway system in New York is you're seeing almost weekly somebody being shoved into the tracks or attacked or beaten or whatever on the railroad tracks. And here's today's New York Post. A New York man sprung on no bail and Facebook posted beating executes wife in front of her 3 kids just hours later. So they let the guy go. And within hours, he went right in front of the kids, killed mommy. This is not making sense from my perspective. But hey, that's just me.
Wow. If on a less acute part of the thing, who on the state's attorney's staff is going to have time to mount a proper presentation of a case here in 24 hours?
Well, it's not just a presentation, it's an investigation in order to do a presentation.
Right. So they got to come up with facts that would indicate to the judge that the guy is a threat to someone, and then present that. And all that's got to happen within a day. What's that going to do to the staff requirements at the state's attorney's office?
The wording in the law is a real and present threat to a person. And so it's got to be, it does, when it defines a person, it then specifically says that it has to be a specific person, not just to persons in general. And so you have to be able to, I guess, what is the standard of evidence in a pretrial hearing? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt, or is it, I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I think you'd have to have a specific name if it's going to be a specific person, and you'd have to have some evidence to support that this person is, this person here in front of you, Your Honor, is a threat to this person.
Isn't there also provision in this law that the presiding judge cannot use the suspect's history as evidence towards does he prevent a threat or does he present
typically
a threat or
prior crimes are not necessarily evidence. They can be considered in certain cases, but specifically in this law, it says that if you have fled in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean you will flee this time. But if you are making actions already to begin to evade now, that you would be able to be detained. But just because you have made threats that you will leave or that you will flee the state, or just because you have in the past fled prosecution or attempted to evade coming back to court, that wouldn't necessarily be a reason to detain you.
I don't think I want to be a judge.
The timing of this lawsuit has come under some scrutiny. That the law was passed how long ago? You said 2 years ago?
Yep.
And it's only how recently, I don't know, but it's only somewhat recently that the lawsuit was filed. My understanding, we went to a town hall meeting with Patrick Keneally, help me out.
Mr. McConchy.
Mr. McConchy,
Mr.
Craig
Wilcox.
Wilcox, and Mr. Black, the sheriff, or the chief of police for Crystal Lake. And they were talking about this. There was a promise when this law was passed that, okay, yeah, there's some problems here, but we'll get this thing passed and then we'll go in and we'll fix it. And the lawsuit waited this long because they kept turning to them saying, okay, we got to fix this. And there's been no effort on the part of the supermajority or the governor to actually go in and start fixing this.
Actually,
Yeah,
I
so
think-
this was passed right at the beginning of the last legislative session. Or actually, I guess it was in the lame duck.
At the end, yes.
The
At
lame
the
duck.
end
So it
of
was
the-
at the end of the last legislative session. So we are now a whole set of legislators down the road, and it still hasn't been fixed.
Right. And you were just saying that the Governor Pritzker has come out now and he's saying that we need to address the concerns in this.
Well, yeah, but he's not doing anything. He's simply letting people know that he wants to fix something.
But he wants to address the concerns. He does not want to reverse course on it. He does not want to.
Well, he's saying that with an election a week away.
Yeah.
I think that's the key point here is, let's see how much he has to say about it after a week from now.
So what else does it do besides eliminate cash bail?
But let me say one thing real quick. The putative objective of this whole thing, as I understand it, was to take away cash bail, the process of cash bail, because that discriminates against people who don't have the money to put up bail. The idea being that they are kept in jail
Whereas their more wealthy
unjustly.
criminal counterparts are able to be released because they have the money to be able to be released.
And that sounds like a righteous objective to me. It's
So
not-
what is the reason for bail? Is the reason for bail to keep the poor people in jail? Or is the reason for bail to give them an incentive to return for the proceedings?
That's where I was going. Thank you. It seems to me the real reason for bail was to let them go free, but incent them to come back to court.
Yes.
And that seems to have been lost in this act entirely.
Well, they did bring up, if I got the numbers right here, what percentage of people that are charged are actually held. Remember,
Yes,
Patrick Keneally asked that question at the town hall.
The number is 3%.
3%. So 97% of the people that are charged with something walk out. They don't, spend any appreciable time in jail at all.
Under the current system.
And then Patrick Keneally gave us an interesting discussion about Governor Pritzker's example of this poor lady who's trying to take care of her kids. She can't even afford diapers, and so she shoplifts some diapers and gets caught. And he was making the argument that this lady could spend 6 months in jail waiting to go to trial for shoplifting diapers that she needed for her kids. Do you want to respond to that? Or?
And the second part of that was for $200 bail.
Right.
Right. And go ahead.
Well, so my response would be to that the generally on a crime like that, you're not going to be charged with anything that's going to allow you to be arrested. Generally, it's going to be charged in a local ordinance. And it's going to be the same as if you didn't mow your grass or whatever. And it's just going to be a ticket that you pay. You're never going to be detained.
Right. But even if you were, Patrick Keneally was making the point that you are paid $40 every day that you're incarcerated.
You get $40 credit against bail for every day you're incarcerated.
So the absolute majority, the maximum number of days that this lady would spend in jail is 5 days.
Right.
Now, I think we're all agreeing here that this person, the judge isn't even going to ask for any bail at all. because you shoplifted some diapers.
Unless there's some other circumstances.
Extenuating
Yeah.
circumstances. Correct. So, yeah, I think that was a pretty lame example that Pritzker put out there, but it'll probably work with people who aren't paying attention. And if you just hear
Because
it on the
it
surface,
sounds-
it's like, oh my God.
Why would anybody think it would be okay to detain her for 6 months for, shoplifting diapers? That would seem unreasonable, unless there were other circumstances that.
So, with no cash bail, what happens if you don't show up when you're supposed to, lacking the financial incentive to come back to court?
According to Mr. Keneally, they issue a summons as opposed to a warrant.
Yes, under the current system, they would issue a warrant.
A warrant is where police can go and actually arrest the person, bring him back in cuffs, and
Yes.
put him in.
A summons is a piece of paper saying you need to return to court.
So what I heard is if you simply don't answer the door for a while, and they can never serve you the summons, you can go on, and if it's second-degree murder, but let's make a distinction here. I when we were doing our practice session last week, I posed the question: all right, what is second-degree murder? First-degree murder is premeditated. You decide, I'm going to go kill this person, and you go do it. Second-degree murder is a crime of passion, you might say. It's you get angry and you kill somebody.
Or it's I looked it up to make sure that was correct, and the other thing is that it can be a disregard for human life. You do something that is intentionally going to put somebody at risk of.
Yeah, but it has to be a pretty flagrant disregard.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody can just ignore the doorbell, and eventually it's going to be a question of whether they can ignore the doorbell long enough or whether the court's going to get tired of sending them summons.
And actually, the summons can be served.
Yeah.
But if
you don't respond,
the only thing they can do,
keep serving it.
Right. The only thing the courts and cops can do, if somebody doesn't show up for the trial, is issue a summons. And if they don't show up for the next trial, all they can do is issue a summons. There isn't an end to the process.
At some point, you could be found in contempt of court. And they could potentially issue a warrant.
Is contempt of court something where you have to post bail?
No, it's not an offense where you would be able to post bail to get. So if you're found in contempt of court, you can be held. So they could put out a warrant for your arrest for contempt. But that's
something.
That would be down the path.
That would be way down the path, yes.
Well, this is all going on by the courts and everything. At least you're safe in your own property, right?
Well, hold on. I think we missed one more thing on the the suppression of the judicial authority, because we didn't talk about the changes to mandatory minimums. So Illinois has mandatory minimums for certain crimes that were passed by the legislature to say that if you commit this crime, this is what you should be detained for this amount of time. The Safety Act then takes and totally flips that on its head, and instead of saying that you should always be held to the mandatory minimum, it makes the mandatory minimums optional.
What?
Yes. The mandatory minimum sentences become optional because there could be extenuating circumstances, and which I guess is an expansion of judicial authority, but would be the expectation based on the new law.
I did not know that. That's scary.
It keeps getting better and better.
And so back to property rights.
Well, like I said, you're safe on your own property.
So somebody's trespassing. What do you do?
Well, I would call the cops and ask them to come get rid of these people that are on my property.
And so the police will respond.
And they will.
And they will, at this point, up until January 1st, be able to arrest somebody for trespassing on your property if they won't leave.
They would
after-
insist. They would tell the person, "You need to go." If the person refused to go, or if the person came back a few minutes later, as soon as the cops were out of sight, the person came back. Cops come back, they'd arrest them.
assuming the person is not a threat to anybody, is not, violent towards anybody. They would just ask them to leave.
Or hasn't gotten violent
Yeah,
yet.
has not been violent. They would ask them to leave. If they didn't, they would be arrested. The Safety Act now is going to make you safer by making it so that they can issue that ticket, but cannot remove them or arrest them unless they become violent.
So it's like a traffic ticket.
Yes.
So these people could move onto my property, throw up tents, that kind of thing, do whatever, and I can't remove them, and the police can't remove them.
Well, he can. The police can't remove him, but he can grab a hold of him and drag him off the yard, can't he?
You cannot use force.
It's his property.
You cannot use force against somebody unless they're in imminent threat of death or great bodily harm.
So what happens if he grabs a hold of this guy and
If they are not
Pulls him
using
off his
force
yard.
against you, you can't use force against them.
what happens if you do?
You will then be charged with assaulting them on your own property for removing them. And the setting up tents then presents an even bigger issue, because then Illinois law for tenants very much favors the tenant, whether there's a agreement that they are your tenant or not. And so basically Illinois has squatters' rights, so that if somebody comes and sets up tents or decides to move into your RV parked in your driveway or whatever, if you can't remove them for trespassing, and then they stay there long enough to then be able to claim they are a tenant there, the process for evicting them is a very long, drawn-out process.
At some point, can they evict you?
Wow.
I asked the question at the town hall. What if they've set up their tent in front of your truck that you use for work? What do you do to get your truck if they don't move? You can't take your truck to work. They're stopping your ability to, for commerce and to, make a living.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you could do.
Well, I'm sure you could seek redress by suing them.
You mean the person that is set up squatters' rights in your yards? You're gonna.
You'd have to. This is a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah.
Well, it should be a ridiculous conversation, but it's not, because this is an actual law.
And it's already been passed.
Right.
And nobody seems to be moving yet.
So
This being November 1, nobody's moving yet to do anything to fix it or forestall it. It's going into
So-
effect on January 1.
we've talked about how it affects the rights of the criminals. How does it affect the police officers?
Well, it makes their job just that much easier, right?
Because there were some policing reforms, the term they used, and so we were improving policing here in Illinois.
It is notable that the chief, Chief Black of Crystal Lake, and Patrick Kennelly, they weren't opposed. They liked the idea of body cameras. In fact, what did the chief of Crystal Lake, Chief Black, what did he say about, somebody calls up and after they've been arrested, they accuse the police officer of doing this or that, and he likes having the body camera. He gets to show them here, this didn't happen. We can look at the video.
The idea of body cameras is great.
Yep, everybody agrees
protects
on
police
that.
officers, protects citizens. It's a great idea. The problem is the unfunded mandate of it. The fact that you now have the requirement to have body cameras, the requirement to store. I don't know what the timeline is, but it's a lot of data to store. You have to have people who are responsible for the storage of the body cameras when the officers are off duty. You have to have people to respond to the FOIA requests for that data. And so basically when you have a small department that's 2 or 3 officers or, in small municipalities, and you're requiring them to add another staff member just to deal with body cameras. Plus you've got the cost of the cameras and the cost of the storage. It's just not a burden that they're going to be able to to shoulder. So ultimately, what's going to happen is they're going to have to not have a police department. Some of these small municipalities.
Which is going to put a greater burden on the county.
Yes.
To cover that area.
Yes.
Okay. What about use of force and pursuit?
So this law makes it so that they can't use chokeholds. Makes it so that they can't use a taser or a stun gun to stop somebody who is fleeing. Makes it so that they can't pursue somebody who is fleeing. So if the officer attempts to arrest you and you take off running, they can't chase you. They can't pursue you.
At all.
At all.
So it's not just a restriction of speeding after them in a car. It can't.
Includes foot pursuit.
At what point does it become pursuit? The first time he takes
when you are
the
not,
first step?
Well, when you are not offering a threat of violence to them, I believe would be the standard.
So you don't really have to run away. You could just walk away.
Because at some point if you're just walking away, that's going to have to, because there's, resisting a police officer. If you try to walk away during a investigative stop with a police officer, they can, it's resisting a police officer, and that in itself is a crime.
Is it detainable?
Well, in an investigative stop, you are detained until the officer releases you.
Okay.
You are to be considered detained. So, yeah, I don't know where that line is, where it's pursuit, where it's, that's going to come down to judges and attorneys arguing about it, I think. I don't think there's a clear line.
Well, I mean, does that hold true? That there's a mass murder. The police come in and you're shooting the last 2 or 3 of your victims, and you run away. They can't pursue you.
Well, if it's reasonable to believe that you're an immediate threat to somebody, then yes.
Well, if they drop the gun and then run.
That doesn't necessarily, just because they've dropped a weapon doesn't mean they're not still a threat, an imminent threat. Because you can still investigate, but you can't, especially, I don't know how that works with police dogs. That's going to be a whole nother.
There's a lot of confusion here. In fact, the thread going through everything we heard in that town hall meeting from the police and from state's attorney point of view was the vagueness of the wording of large pieces of this law. Situations where definitely something's going to have to be defined in court before anybody really knows what to do.
So from the perspective of those who wrote this law, police are out of control, and we need to rein them in because they are doing all sorts of evil things to these criminals.
Yeah, this law was pushed and started in the shadow of the George Floyd riots.
Yes, and so to protect those who are wanting to complain against or file a complaint against police officers, this bill sets up the ability to be able to lodge a complaint anonymously. So currently, if you're going to file a complaint against a police officer, you have to file a sworn affidavit saying, this is what the problem was, this is what I saw, this is. Now you can do that anonymously, which then gives the police officer no ability to face their accuser, which those who wrote the bill would say that it's to protect the accusers.
How about
isn't that in the Bill of Rights?
Not specifically enumerated.
I believe that's a constitutional right to face your accusers.
It is generally considered to be a right in our judicial system, but is not specifically mentioned in the Bill of Rights.
If a complaint about a police officer can be submitted anonymously, how do they investigate it?
Well, you can investigate. You got body cameras, and you've got other officers who are on the scene and things like that. Generally, that you would be able to investigate, but you could then potentially have frivolous complaints
which could do a real number on an officer's career.
Yes.
And there's nothing proven by anybody anywhere.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Just, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That anonymous, I don't take anonymous phone calls. If I don't recognize the number, I don't pick it up. Right.
Yeah.
And I simply doesn't make any sense to me.
So in order to prevent incidents like the George Floyd incident and others, they have decided that we need to have more police training. So as part of this bill, they've implemented more ongoing training for police officers, specifically related to use of force and just ongoing training. But police officers in Illinois already have ongoing training requirements. This just adds to those, which is another cost passed on to every police department. Part of that is the requirement for sheriff's candidates to hold a certificate stating that they've completed the minimum standards basic law enforcement training course. It has to be issued by the Illinois law enforcement. I forget what the name of the organization is. The organization that provides oversight to police officers in the state of Illinois. We saw here in McHenry County a challenge to a candidate for sheriff because they said he did not have a certificate that said that he had completed that course. The result of those hearings was that he stayed on the ballot because the general counsel for the state agency that would be issuing that certificate came in and testified that no such certificate exists. So it just shows how well written the law is.
Just to go back a little bit here, in the Sixth Amendment, the way it is worded here is to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him. So you do have a right to be confronted by those who are witnessing against you, and that is in the Constitution.
The standard for that, if there was a complaint filed, so the standard for those hearings against the police officer would be that they would have the opportunity to face the witnesses, but
not anymore.
Well, they would, yes, because there would have to be an investigation. Just because there's a complaint doesn't mean that there's necessarily going to be action against the officer. The complaint just starts the process of the investigation.
Well, my understanding was this is going to end up on their record, and they really have no way to confront it because they can't confront their.
Yeah, so it creates a state database for complaints against police officers that will then be searchable and theoretically FOIA-able, as each wouldn't be FOIA-able until the point where each investigation is concluded, but would be a FOIA-able and a searchable by law enforcement, and potentially harm that officer's ability to continue to work in law enforcement in the state of Illinois.
With all this making of new rules and changing rules that have been around a long time, is there any concern in this law? Is there any thought given to the basic causes of crimes, or the whole idea of making them not happen in the first place?
No. This is just a reform of the criminal justice system, not actually stopping any crime or intending to stop any crime.
I wonder how many of the people that were proponents of this law and signed on to it have ever been a police officer in the inner city of Chicago or Rockford. I mean, I'll tell you what. There's not enough money to get me to do that job. And if I got it just out of a survival instinct, I'd be the most trigger happy son of a person that I know what's going down there. I've driven in those neighborhoods. I've been in those neighborhoods. It's even if they're not shooting at the time, I was driving Uber a couple years ago, and I was dropping somebody off, and a block and a half away there was a shooting. Broad daylight, So I mean, it's dangerous. That's all you can say. In the meantime, I wouldn't do it. Police they're coming up with this at a time when they've been talking about defunding police. The people, the left is attacking the police. They need laws like this because the police are out of control. I think I pointed out the other day that it's my understanding that there are over 600,000 police officers in the United States, law enforcement officers in the U.S. If 1% of those were bad, that would be 6,000 people. And I don't really think we're getting 6,000 examples of bad police officers. I think, and if you look at it historically, the police at this time are the most professional in the history of the planet. And by professional, I mean they do their job as it's supposed to be done. Now, that's not to say that they do it perfectly. I'm not claiming perfection here, but certainly there are examples of abuse of authority. But compared to what has historically been seen, we've got an incredibly professional police force that we should be proud of. And if they want to address the problems that we're seeing with, some police officers and such, that's fine. But this isn't the solution. The task of a police officer is going to be that much harder because of it, which is only going to increase the exodus of police officers when they've already got a shortage. And you were saying we're fighting with that issue here in McHenry County.
Yeah. Every department is facing shortages. They can't find enough people to fill positions. So one of the things that this act does that I think is probably a step in the right direction is that it provides a decertification process for police officers who are convicted of certain crimes. So there's automatic decertification based on certain crimes. Things like criminal sexual abuse, prostitution, pimping, aggravated assault, criminal sexual abuse.
Can they hold these police officers under bail? Cash bail?
That's interesting because, everything you just mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, is a no detention offense.
Yeah. Some of them that are interesting on the list is keeping a gambling place or offering a bribe. Are those things that we really have a lot of police officers doing? Do we have a lot of police officers holding illegal poker games?
I'm sure it happens somewhere, but yeah.
Public indecency, harassment by telephone, evidence interference. There's a whole list of crimes that could potentially, if the police officer is convicted of it, would be decertified as a police officer.
What crime? Hassling somebody over the phone.
Harassment by telephone is a
harassment by
crime.
telephone.
Yeah,
that's a crime.
Yes, that is a crime in the state of Illinois.
And wow, that would be subject to a lot of interpretation. Okay.
Well, they would have to be convicted of that crime.
Yeah.
So, and so the state does lay out what that crime is specifically. So
well,
one of the other
go ahead.
Little interesting things that this law also does is it subjects cities with a population over 100,000 to a requirement that the union can collectively bargain on residency. So if you have a city with over 100,000 people, the union can say, this percentage of the officers have to be from within the city.
Is that the way that's written? Going right now, I think that's the way it is in Chicago. All of them have to be.
So it expands it to any city with over 100,000. So that includes a lot of the suburbs now.
So could the union decide that they want to go the other way? They don't require.
Well, if it
What?
doesn't mention it, then it doesn't mention it.
What's
So it would
that got to do with any? How did that get in this law?
It's 800 pages. Are you kidding?
got to fill it with something.
I think on page 692, it says they can arrest Ken Nicholson for any reason at all.
I have no
and
doubt.
hold him permanently without bail. It's
Do I get to face my accuser?
So
No.
it does also allow you, if you're in custody, you're allowed 3 phone calls within 3 hours. If you're transferred to another facility, you still get your 3 phone calls within 3 hours. Requires them to post the phone number in plain view for a public defender. So that's a good thing in the law.
well, 3 phone calls. You can call your lawyer, and then you still have time to call
Your bookie.
order a pizza or your bookie. Yeah.
Or you can, you can call your lawyer. You can call your family. You can. You don't have to call and get somebody to come, pay your bail because you know more cash bail. So.
You just call up somebody to say hi.
Yeah.
Okay. I personally am privileged to live in McHenry County, Illinois, and where I live, our crime rate is very low, and the general reputation of the police is very high, and there's a general sense of security. I can quickly see how pretty soon after this goes into effect, we're going to wind up with that no longer being true. I'm not really concerned about somebody throwing up a tent in my front yard, but I am concerned.
I was thinking about it. Just
well, you would be welcome to live in my front yard if you. But general crime in the streets is going to jump. There's no doubt in my mind because A, we don't have enough policemen. B, they're not allowed to do the things that they can currently do to curtail the bad activity. We're tying their hands in a number of ways. And this is a legislated position. It's not a deal where, one bad politician has caused all these problems. This is going to be the law, right? How quick are we going to be able to take corrective measures when crime rates start getting out of hand, like they currently are in Chicago and other places?
Does it not create an incentive to commit a crime outside of the jurisdiction that you live in,
right
nearby?
So the well-policed areas, people are going to leave there to come to less policed areas to do their malfeasance. The thing I'm worried about is the inertia in the system. It just takes a long time to pass a law and a long time to change procedures and policies. And I think the reaction to the opportunities that criminals are going to see is going to happen faster. And that bothers me. That worries me.
well, I think I brought up the idea that in the longer run, you're liable to see a backlash in the other direction. At some point, the crime gets so out of hand, people are finally going to rise up and say, whoa, wait a minute, this is nuts. You got to do something about this. And that's really what happened in 1996 when Clinton signed what was previously called the Biden crime bill and became known as the Clinton crime law. It was criminal reform law, which put a lot of people in jail. I believe it had a 3 strikes clause in it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a response to people were in the news. Crime was just all over the place, and people were like, "You got to do something about the crime."
So how have we come to the point where a bill like this that is obviously has so many flaws in it could pass?
We got ourselves a supermajority of Democrats. That's how we got to this. You tied that together with
I am a staunch conservative, and I have a problem with a lot of things the Democrats do. But let's remember, there's a lot of Democrats suing to suspend this law.
That's true, but there
And
was still a supermajority that passed this law
And
in
so
the middle of the night.
that supermajority wasn't doing this to create more crime. They're doing this because they've seen a problem in the system, or they've seen a perceived problem in the system. And what do we do to fix that, to fix the narrative?
Well, I think that comes back to the question of what's the cause of crime. And I've said, not on our podcast here, I've said for some time now that the cause of the crime goes back to 1965 with LBJ's Great Society. I'm sorry. They came out with this welfare, and one of the requirements of welfare was they had to get the father out of the house. If you're going to collect the welfare, dad's got to be gone. And somebody I was talking to recently was talking about they were sending people to houses to make sure dad was gone, that they weren't lying about this. And what happens when dad's gone? You don't have a positive male role model in the house. The gentleman running for governor of Minnesota, I communicated with him on Facebook, and he sent a story that he allowed us to run. He was talking that in 1960, 80% of black families in America were two-parent families. Today, it's 20%. And we're catching, and white families, like we're white, are catching up. More and more of our families are broken as well. If you don't have a positive male role model in the house, those children are going to be looking for that role model elsewhere, and they find it out in the street.
Well, we're not going to fix that overnight.
No.
Neither are we going to fix this bill in a couple of months through any kind of rational process. So what we really need to do is listen to our state's attorneys who are just asking us to suspend implementation of these things going into effect on January 1 until we either throw this bill away and rewrite it so it makes sense and allow for due process and due representation by everybody, including cops and judges and attorneys. It's not going to happen in any case between now and January 1. So all we can hope for really is that the lawsuit will result in suspension and we get a chance to try again and do a little better.
Hopefully with a better set of legislators.
Yeah, and that's going to change a lot, hopefully, in a week.
Well, there is one way that individuals can fix this thing for themselves quickly.
What's that?
Move out.
Oh,
get out of Illinois. Go somewhere where they haven't lost their minds.
Join the thundering herd.
Well, the thing is, this is happening in Illinois, but this is the conversation that's going around the nation, and it is coming to other states too. It's just a matter of time. If we allow the narrative to continue, and if we don't push back against it, it's not going to stop here.
I was in a professional meeting with, haven't even brought this up with you guys before, a couple of days ago with a guy that just moved here from Oakland. And he came to McHenry County because he had a good job and he heard that the crime rate was low and we were comfortable with our cops and all that stuff. He didn't even know about the Safety Act until he got here. Right. Said, "Oh, sorry." In fact, I'm afraid I probably told him. But at any rate, he described a situation that's the stuff you see on right-wing television is not false, folks. He moved here from Oakland, California, because it had been more than a year since he could have folks over to his home for dinner in their own car. It's one of the stories he said. If you park a car in my driveway, and I don't have room to put your car and my car in the garage, right? If you park your car in my driveway, it's not a question of if, but when your car will be broken into. And it will happen well within how long it would take to have dinner. It's simply a given. And I'm going, my mouth is open. And said, what? And he said, there are lots of stories exactly like that. People would not come to our neighborhood where we lived for social reasons anymore. We had to go to them. And the reason was the lawlessness on the street for anything short of murder is rampant. And murder's up too. But petty crime is just completely out of control. And it sort of made my evening, that conversation. So it's really going to happen, folks, and it could happen here. And that's
and so we kind of touched on it earlier that this does nothing to address the causes of crime. Right. Does nothing to address the amount of crime that's being committed in the state of Illinois. Does nothing to address any of those problems. Doesn't reduce violent crime. Doesn't reduce murders. Doesn't do anything to help the current situation that we have here in Illinois. Other than, I guess potentially it could incentivize police officers not to commit crimes. Potentially.
And I don't think they really need a lot of incentive.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid it'll go beyond not committing crimes. It will probably cause police officers not to perform their duties.
Likely.
Certainly makes sense to me. I mean, if I had a job as a policeman and I was looking for one, I hadn't found one, an alternative yet, I'm going to be real slow to act like a cop.
Yeah, that's before this law even was passed, that the environment has gotten to the point where anytime a cop is, involved with somebody, this could turn against them. Not just that they're gonna, somebody could shoot at them. Cops got shot yesterday. I think the 2 cops got shot today from some guy on a roof. Cops are being accused of things all the time, and are they guilty of these things? Doesn't seem like it.
Well, all I can say is I hope the courts suspend this law so we can fix it. And if they don't, I'll be looking harder for where I can move, because I won't stay in a place like that.
So I guess we should thank everybody for listening. Thanks. If you want to continue to hear more like today's episode, subscribe to the editorial staff on your favorite podcast platform, so you don't miss any of the common sense response to the progressive narrative. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/editorial staff, or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/the response. You can find us at McHenryCountyResponse.com. You can find us on YouTube now, the new YouTube handles. We just got our YouTube handle today. So we're the editorial staff. So you can go to youtube.com/the editorial staff, and you'll find our page on YouTube.
And I do want to mention that this is only our fourth time if you count the time that didn't work.
Yeah, fourth episode.
Yeah. So we expect to get better. That's our plan. No promises.
So if you want to offer us advice on that, you can, send us an email or give us a comment. We would ask that you would share some of our content to your favorite social media platform. Now that Twitter is a free speech space, you can probably share us out there without getting in trouble. So you can continue to spread the common sense response to the progressive narrative. The editorial staff is a project of the McHenry County Response. So be sure to check out McHenryCountyResponse.com.
We are sponsored by
Guns and Such. We're a gun store in McHenry. We buy, sell, trade, consign. We do concealed carry classes, and we will very soon have a shooting range.
Cool. And
3-Step Internet, we build websites for small organizations, and we pay attention to what really needs to be done as opposed to what people think needs to be done.
And Rich Publicity, which in that capacity, I've become more of an author than anything. And if you wanted to check out my latest novel, it's a novel for teens. Great-grandfather comes to live with his great-grandson and shares his experiences in the U.S. Navy during World War II. It's called The Burning Sea of Iron Bottom Bay, and it's available on Amazon. Thank you.
All right.
Good night,
Thanks for listening. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.